classic. Hi, it's me, Tim Dodd, the Everyday Astronaut. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Now, this is my hosted version of SpaceX's Iridium 3 launch. Now, this is a launch out of Vandenberg Air Force Base in California. So they're launching from launch pad SLC-4E. And here we go, perfect timing. We got the SpaceX Live-Stream running over here. And we're going to be just kind of keeping this, we're going to be keeping this in the background here. So what's going to happen here, they're going to be launching 10 Iridium NEXT satellites. They all get stuffed inside that payload fairing, and launches from Vandenberg head south, or some sort of southward direction, and they go into a polar orbit. Only one ear. Guys, what's happening to my life? Hang on. We're going to fix this. We're going to fix this. And here we go. Down mix to mono. Is that better? That better be better. And I'm going to do it here too. I apologize, everybody. This, again, same thing I've done every day of my life. Yet, for whatever reason today, it decides I don't want to be nice to you. Alright, is that better for everybody? Alright, so what we'll do is we're going to pull up the SpaceX Live-Stream bigger when they start actually talking and all that stuff. So, let me know if it's all good. Good. I apologize, everybody. You can still taste the rainbow. Thank you, thank you. So, just to read the instructions for my microphone. Again, this is the same setup I've used forever. And I wake up this morning. I did a test last night. I was responsible, guys. And for whatever reason, it just wanted to say, you know what, Tim? You know nothing. And now we're going to make sure everybody on the internet knows you know almost nothing. So, there we go. Okay, so back to the rant of what we're doing. I saw people asking, is SpaceX live streaming this? Yes, absolutely. SpaceX has been live streaming, I think, actually every launch they've ever done. Not always very well. But that's one of the things that's so exciting about SpaceX. They give us an opportunity to actually watch every single launch with them, which is really, really cool and really exciting. Now, hilariously enough, these are becoming very routine. Like I said earlier, you probably didn't hear it because it wasn't working. But this is the 42nd launch of the Falcon 9 vehicle. This is the 14th launch this year of the Falcon 9, which is crazy. I mean, just last year we were at, I don't even remember how we got, like 7 or 8 launches. This year we're at 14. So they just keep picking it up like crazy. This is the 6th launch from Vandenberg, which is not that many because they've actually launched out of Vandenberg their 2nd launch ever, or of the Falcon 9, or 3rd launch. One of them was out of Vandenberg as well. So they've been launching out of there for a long time. It's just funny that there's just so few polar orbit launches. And this is the 3rd launch they're doing for Iridium. So there we go. So I have somebody asking about BFR. Check out my newest video. I did a video. I stayed up all night and cut a video. It took 15 hours from the minute the thing was done to the minute it was online to be able to cut the video. But I did a video talking about BFR, and I did a video before that talking about Dragon propulsive landing and why propulsive landing with the Dragon capsule got canceled. And in the end of it, we basically said, you know, they're doing this because why would they practice landing a capsule with engines mounted on the side when that's nothing like what the upcoming future rocket's going to look like? I even said, you know, we're going to see their upcoming rocket look a lot more like, be more of a workhorse. So, and that's exactly what happened. Marcus House is, BFR is cool, Earth to Earth kind of stupid. Hey, we'll see though. That's what I'm working on right now. Those of us in 2 Media and all that stuff, people in our streamy place over in Discord, we're working on scripting, at least that's what we'll be doing more today, scripting for basically talking about that Earth-to-Earth transportation of BFR. And basically my personal consensus at this point is, why not, if it's become so routine? If they're doing these tanker runs, if a mission to the moon, or a mission, some common missions maybe to say you're going to geostationary orbit and you have this massive thing in there, or maybe you're going to whatever, they will be refueling. So they're going to be launching this thing, like some missions might take 4 or 5 tanker refuels. They're going to have that thing down so packed. After 1,000 launches of that thing being successful and 1,000 successful landings or something, why not put people on board? You know, at this point, why not? That's kind of my thought. So It would be super cool for tourist orbit contracts at Kerbal. You got that right. Boca Chica will be Boca Chica can be used especially for interplanetary missions, since they actually kind of have to dodge the islands. They only have one small track, one inclination that they can fly out of Boca Chica. So it would be really good actually for BFR if it's going to the moon or Mars, because really those inclination changes don't matter too much. You can still make it if you're breaking, well, not necessarily breaking Earth's gravity, but it's easy enough to make up for that. But say you're trying to do like an equatorial or something like that. Yeah. Matt Smith with a super chat. Thank you so much. Which planet am I excited to learn more about? That's an excellent question. Can I say planet system? Because I do think Jupiter offers potentially the most exciting potential in the near future. Or not the near future, but just the future period. I think there's so many cool jovial moons that I think we need to be exploring. But at the same time, I would say, honestly, Mars is just so exciting because it's relatively, in the grand scheme of things, Mars is relatively easy to get to. Relatively, still incredibly difficult. But relatively easy for people to get to, relatively easy for people to live on compared to other bodies. I would say Mars, honestly, it just seems the most feasible for humans to explore. But you asked, what planets am I excited to learn more about? And yeah, I would just say that the Jupiter system just has so many cool things around it. So here we go. Webcast is now live. What we'll do, guys, is we'll pop over. We'll let them do their talk. And then I'll kind of mix their audio up. And then I make it so you don't really hear them talking. We don't compete with each other. So if you want to tune in to if you stay right here, you'll hear the audio fine. You won't hear us talking on top of each other too much. Here we go.
Good morning from Hawthorne, California. It is October 9th, just after 5:21 a.m. Pacific time. Welcome to the webcast of the Falcon 9 mission, carrying the third flight of 10 Iridium NEXT satellites. You're seeing a live view of Falcon 9 as we prepare for launch in just about 15 minutes from now. Launch is currently scheduled for 12 hours, 37 minutes, and 1 second Universal Time, or 5 hours, 37 minutes, 01 seconds a.m. Pacific Daylight Savings Time. I'm John Isbrucker, Falcon 9 Principal Integration Engineer, and I'll be bringing you coverage of the SpaceX launch for the Iridium NEXT satellites during the webcast. Now, this is our third of 8 planned launches for Iridium. Our first launch was January of this year, followed with a second one on June 25th. Today's mission represents our 15th Falcon 9 launch of the year.
Nice and simple. I don't know if there's anything else to say about it, to be honest. We pretty much went over all that.
Today's launch is from historic Space Launch Complex 4 at Vandenberg Air Force Base, our West Coast launch site. You can see illuminated in the pre-dawn darkness the two-stage Falcon 9 vehicle. It stands 70 meters tall. That's taller than a 20-story building. Now, the first stage of the Falcon 9 will provide the initial force to get out of the majority of the Earth's atmosphere. Today's flight will feature stage separation at about 66 kilometers altitude. If you look closely, you can see the first stage is the part of the vehicle that has the SpaceX logo on it. The first stage today will be returning to our drone ship named Just Read the Instructions. It'll take 3 burns of the first stage to get back to the drone ship, which will be located about 300 kilometers downrange of the launch pad in the Pacific Ocean. On top of the first stage is the second stage. That'll take the satellites from the edge of space and accelerate them to orbital speeds of just over 7.5 kilometers per second, 10 times faster than a bullet. Finally, on top of the vehicle is the 17-foot diameter payload fairing, inside of which are the 10 Iridium NEXT satellites. Now you can see structure next to the Falcon 9. That's our transporter Erector. There's 2 major parts of a transporter Erector. First is the launch mount, the platform at the bottom that the rocket sets upon, and it provides connections into the first stage. On the side of the Falcon 9, you can see the strongback. That's the vertical tower. It provides connections to the second stage and the spacecraft. Now these connections are umbilicals that carry power, propellant, gases, electrical commands, and vehicle telemetry. Finally, one reminder about the transport Erector. It will recline before launch to a position of 77.5 degrees. That's different than our 39A launches on the East Coast, where the Erector reclines after Falcon 9 lifts off.
Okay, I think they're done talking. Any questions, guys? I'll still be listening in to see if anything happens, but I kind of turned them down a little bit. It is funny, they called it historic. I've never heard them say historic launch pad 4E. I mean, technically everything out, every launch complex is pretty much historic, but I think it's not fair to say Slick 4E is historic.
Down looking for an on-time launch this morning. Everything on the Falcon 9 continues to look good right now. The Falcon 9 team working no significant issues or problems. We rolled out on the evening of the 7th. We went vertical. Checkouts have done well, and we are currently in the middle of the propellant loading sequence. We began loading fuel at T-minus 70 minutes. Fuel is now loaded on the second stage, and we are complete with fuel loading on the first stage, except for a small amount of topping off that we'll do in the last 7 minutes or so of the countdown. The major activity going on right now is liquid oxygen loading. That's in progress on both the first and the second stages, and that'll continue down to the last 3 to 2 minutes of the countdown. Our next major activities that we're going to see are the opening is the retraction of the strongback. Then inside of 1 minute we'll be opening or starting the flight computer, counting us down for igniting the Merlin engines right before T0 and then release at T0. You may notice in a close-up the white grid fins. These are the aluminum grid fins. We're using those today instead of the dark titanium because this is a return from a trajectory that is less extreme than a geostationary transfer launch, and that allows us to use the aluminum grid fins. On the spacecraft side, the Iridium team has gone to internal power. They're working no issues. Everything's looking good for the 10 satellites. For the range, we're operating out of Vandenberg. The Western Range is providing us similar support, airspace clearance, sea clearance, as we use for the Eastern Range launches. And finally this morning, the weather looks excellent. It's calm at ground level. Upper altitude winds a little bit high, but they're also within acceptable limits. So everything's looking good. Falcon 9, the Iridium satellites, the range, and the weather for an on-time launch in just over 9.5 minutes from now.
Excellent. All right, so let's talk about a few things here, guys. First off, oh, there we go. First, I better answer Thomas's question. Hello, Thomas. How you doing? This is a new booster. This is brand new. This is not refurbished. The next time we'll see, I think we'll see a refurbished core actually in 2 days. Hold on. He's still talking. He's still talking.
Low Earth orbit. This is our third of 8 planned launches.
He's saying a bunch. So in 2 days we will see a reflown core again. I think is that our third reflown core for SES-11? I'm trying to remember if it's our third or just our second. But I'm still listening to what he's saying.
Those commands will individually release the Iridium satellites one at a time. Every 100 seconds, we should get a satellite release, and that whole sequence will take 15 minutes, and we're going to try to bring it to you later on in the webcast. From there, the satellites will maneuver to their final orbit slightly higher from where we drop them off.
There we go.
Here's Matt Desch of Iridium with more on the Iridium system.
So, real quick, I wanted to suss this out here, guys. Those of you in the chat room, I'm super excited you guys are all here. But first and foremost, a little community update. Let's keep it positive. Joking about crashing and disasters is not very not encouraged. This is a very serious thing. These rockets are massive, and when something happens, it's a very bad thing. So we don't really talk about that, and that's general across the space flight community. You don't say like, "I hope the space shuttle blows up." Not cool. Just setting that out there. Otherwise, have fun, ask questions. I'm here to answer whatever we can do. These things are normally kind of boring. We can watch it later if you want. Well, let's learn a little bit.
Reaching most global communication provider in the world. We provide service to every part of the planet through 66 satellites going around the Earth, all in low Earth orbit, about 780 kilometers above us, all interconnected in space, providing a mesh network of communication that covers every part of the planet, no matter where an asset that needs to be tracked needs to be. Just to give you an example, Howard.
Thank you, Paul. Good point, Paul, and thank you so much for the super chat. That's amazing. Thank you.
A warm spot in a very cold place, they don't have to go to the top of the mountain to point towards a satellite someplace in space. Our satellite, and there's a new one every 8 to 10 minutes. So particularly for those in harm's way or...
So I have a lot of people asking if I'm ever going to finish the Saturn V Lego set. Yes, I am. Actually, quick little life update. Thanks to Patreon supporters, I have now a Blackmagic cinema camera. And of course, the only lens that I decided to get, because I'm an idiot, was a 14mm, which is a 28mm equivalent focal length, which I thought would be pretty wide angle. Come to find out, if I was building a Saturn V right now, you would see less than nothing. So that being said, I have an 8mm, which is a 16mm equivalent coming, so we can kind of do a shot, so I can finish up that stupid Saturn V and put it here on the desk and you guys can see. And Jerome, thank you so much. Get a nice orbit and successful landing. Agreed, everybody. Applause to these two people. Thank you so much, Paul and Doreen and everybody else, for the super chat. Thank you very much. It's not necessary, but thank you. It's really kind. The launch is in 5 minutes and 35 seconds. Here, we're going to do this. Any other questions? I hear a lot of people asking me about Blue Origin. I want to go ahead and address my personal thoughts on Blue Origin. They're awesome. And I think the whole thing about space, I want this generation of space fans, I want us to be less Ford versus Chevy and more hooray everything, because all of this is for the better good of everything. It's for human exploration, it's for expanding our knowledge, it's for bringing the cost of space down. So 100% yay Blue Origin, 100% yay ULA and NASA. I obviously have plans that I don't think NASA should be building in the contractor of building rockets. But that being said, 100% yay Blue Origin. They are incredible. They're playing it a little slower than SpaceX, which in 20 years we'll have to see what that looks like. Maybe the safe approach, they're really slow and methodical. Maybe that safe approach will pay off. Maybe they're not being aggressive enough compared to SpaceX, who's extremely aggressive with timelines, extremely aggressive with their evolution of their vehicle. But I'm obviously a huge SpaceX fan. You guys all know this. But I'm also a huge Blue Origin fan. So, yeah. So I'm excited. You should be too. Blue Origin's very cool. This future is very exciting, period. Seeing two major players like this. Yeah. Let's see. Just making sure I didn't miss anything here. The guy is saying, Matt however you say his name, the CEO of Iridium, is like, this is only launch 3. We'll be back. You'll be seeing a lot more of us. It's very true. They have a major constellation going in place. Grady, thank you. Lifelong dream to be the first to drift a Volvo Polestar on Mars. Please help me make that a reality, SpaceX. Excellent comment, Grady. You will have to bring your own oxygen supply for the vehicle. I'm a big fan of Polestars. I'm a big fan of Volvo, but maybe a Tesla would be better because it doesn't need to burn oxygen to drive around on Mars. Just a thought. Just saying. We got 3 minutes left. I'm going to keep this kind of down. Once it gets down to the terminal count, we'll make it large. I have people asking me about the linear aerospike engine. I think in general, aerospikes are phenomenal. For those of you who don't know what an aerospike engine is, a traditional engine, a rocket engine, has a large exhaust nozzle, and it's really only efficient at one specific point in altitude. So it's optimized so the ones on sea level are a smaller nozzle because there's a lot of compression of the actual atmosphere, 14.7 psi. And as that gets into a vacuum, you actually want that nozzle to be longer and longer so it focuses all the energy in the direction of travel. Now, an aerospike engine does the opposite almost. Instead of the gas flowing outwards, they basically shoot gases in towards for better or worse, a small nipple, or in the case of a linear aerospike, it's a long strip of them, and they force all the gas towards each other, and it compresses itself, and it's very efficient at both sea level and in a vacuum. Very cool concept. I'm surprised that it hasn't actually successfully really been done and flown. So I would be very excited personally to see it happen because it makes a lot of sense. But yeah, and we had another Matt Smith. Thank you. Favorite rocket? Yours is Sea Dragon. Sea Dragon is crazy. I wish we could have seen that thing be flown, although it would have killed probably like 90% of the ocean. Sea Dragon is basically like a battleship. Like take the world's biggest ship, point it up, and then have its engine bell be the size of the first stage of a Saturn V. That's the Sea Dragon. Favorite rocket though for now, Falcon 9. I love it. Okay, we're gonna pull this baby up here. We're going to listen in on the final countdown. The fairing, we don't have any word on fairing recovery. I don't know if they're attempting fairing recovery out on the West Coast. They haven't really they've been pretty quiet about fairing recovery.
AFTS is ready for launch.
We've seen pictures of them parachuting it down, but I don't think we've seen any attempts for them to actually land it on any kind of platform. That's what they're up to next. They do have to land it on like a bouncy house or something.
Stage 2, the startup pressures.
The parachutes are just for the final bit.
Right. LD go for launch.
30
seconds, guys. Still gets goosebumps every time. I love this. Hey, thank you, Pone. Rocket dancing in air for boost back if you have any experiments. All the best. Well,
Stage 1 is at liftoff pressures.
Rocket dancing in air
15
for boost back.
Falcon 9 configured for flight.
10.
Thank you very
9.
much. Here we go.
8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Here we go, everybody. There it's going about 100 miles an hour already. For those of you who already have kilometers an hour, I want to help make it easier.
Just multiple operations and secure the pad on pen editing.
GC copies, Wilco.
240 miles an hour or so. And it just gets faster and faster from here on out, everybody. Typical Vandenberg morning, foggy. So the vehicle starts to do a gravity turn almost immediately. It doesn't go up very long. It actually goes up and starts to curve almost immediately. Within a few kilometers, it will start to pitch over, and it just continues to pitch over. The point of getting into an orbit requires you to actually be going horizontally 17,500 miles an hour in order to actually put yourself into an orbit. And the reason is that basically you're falling. So think about just throwing a ball. If you threw a ball straight up, it comes straight back
T plus
down.
1 minute and 17 seconds into flight. Falcon 9 approaching max Q.
Max Q is maximum aerodynamic pressure. That's basically as the vehicle gets faster, obviously the wind or the air pressure gets stronger on the vehicle. But
You've heard the call out, MVAC chilling.
As it goes up.
We're now
So there's a
getting the
point where
second
it's going
stage
faster.
engine ready for ignition.
Second stage is ready for ignition.
Several activities coming up here very shortly. At T plus 2 minutes and 24 seconds, we expect main engine cutoff, followed immediately by stage separation and ignition of the upper stage engine.
Yep.
Right after that, the first stage will begin the first of 3 burns to return us back to the Pacific Ocean to the drone ship parked offshore about 300 kilometers downrange.
All right, so the maximum aerodynamic pressure is a funny thing because it can change depending on vehicle and even depending on launch. But here we go. We're going to see first stage burnout here in a second, and then or main engine cutoff, MECO, And then we'll see stage separation on the right. The right there, that's you're looking down at the second stage engine.
We have eco.
There we go. It cleared. It pulled free of the first stage. And now they light up that second stage. There it goes. Second stage ignition. Everything looks great.
We have back ignition.
You can see the first stage getting pummeled by
T
some
plus
exhaust there.
2
That's
minutes
crazy.
and 47 seconds
Now the
into
first
flight.
burn-
We've
first
had
stage is doing a
successful
burn,
stage
boost back
separation
burn.
and ignition of the upper stage engine. And as you can see, we've also relit 3 of the engines on the first stage to begin the sequence that will return it to the drone ship in the Pacific Ocean. Boost back burn lasts about 30 seconds.
There we go. So
And we have fairing separation.
fairing separation.
Had a brief view of the Iridium satellites as the fairing separated. Again, it's just before dawn as we head south over the Pacific Ocean, so we're not getting any sunlight. First stage boost back burn did complete. Fairing did successfully separate. We're waiting to hear the drone ship AOS. That's acquisition of signal.
All right, so we're getting into this baby's going to be getting ready to land. So the first stage now, it canceled out some of its velocity. So say it's going like this. The first burn is the boost back burn, and it cancels out this velocity. So say if it's so since these are low Earth orbit missions, they have the opportunity to basically just do a boost back burn and fall virtually for more or less straight down. If they are doing a return to launch site and they have the room to do a boost back burn, it actually will reverse its horizontal velocity. So it's going like this, turns around and actually boosts back this way and falls back to the launch pad. Now, with this being a drone ship landing, they currently don't actually have permissions. I hear Iridium 4 is going to be when they have the clearance to actually land back on the West Coast, because they've been landing on land on the East Coast, but they have not landed back on land, an RTLS, return to launch site, landing back on the West Coast. So they still are landing on the drone ship, and since it's a low Earth orbit mission, even though it's a pretty heavy satellite constellation, it still has plenty of margins to land, do a boost back burn. But you'll see these GTO, these geostationary transfer orbits.
Iridium NEXT satellites. Next event in our timeline is in about 35 seconds. That'll be.
So with a low Earth orbit mission like this, though, they have room to do a boost back burn, and so they can actually slow down and cancel out velocity. So. Okay, everything's good. Zeus, everything's still looking great, man. Here we go. This is the stage 1 entry burn. So this is basically doing it's slowing itself down as it goes through the atmosphere, so the atmosphere doesn't rip the vehicle apart. So it's still a 3-engine landing burn. So they have 9 engines on the Falcon 9 vehicle. They only use 3 of them for the boost back burn. They use 3 of them for the entry burn, and then they use only 1 of them for the landing burn. But some of the missions, they've actually done a 3-engine landing burn. At the very, very, very last second, they cut off 2 engines for a little bit softer touchdown. This is the most exciting part for us SpaceX fans, is to watch a stage land.
The automated flight termination system, autonomous flight termination system, has saved on the first stage. We're coming up on T plus 7 minutes. Stage 1 is headed back to the drone ship in the Pacific Ocean. Stage 2 still headed to its initial parking orbit. Shutdown of the second stage engine should be just over T plus 9 minutes into flight.
They have acquisition of signal on the barge.
Now we're getting ready for the landing burn of the first stage.
Here we go, landing burn. The 1-engine landing burn on the left, you see it. Might cut out, the signal cuts out quite often. Does better out at Vandenberg, closer to ground stations. There it is, there's the drone ship. Legs deployed. And signal loss, of course. This is There it is. And it's successful. Yes.
Stage 1 landing successful.
Oh.
7.5 minutes into flight. You can hear from the applause. We lost the signal briefly, then it returned with the view of the first stage in that pre-dawn darkness, sitting on top of just read the instructions. Out in the Pacific Ocean, a successful landing of the first stage.
Beautiful.
Meanwhile, the primary mission continuing, the second stage, 7 minutes and 54 seconds into flight, a little more than a minute left to go. Propulsion continues to look good on the second stage engine as we power to the low Earth parking orbit carrying the 10 Iridium NEXT satellites.
All right, so we're gonna mute them a little bit. I just want to say here, guys, this is still incredible. The fact that they're able to do this so accurately is huge. So this is very promising for something like BFR, because essentially that first stage is doing what the BFR spaceship hopes to do with people someday. Now, I wouldn't personally ride on top of a Falcon 9 booster yet, but they are getting more and more and more reliable. So it's very promising. They're very accurate and they're very reliable. So,
second stage call. Second stage just about to go into Earth orbit.
So once it gets up to 27,000 kilometers per second, we'll see or around there, a little faster because they're a little bit higher in altitude. You will see the second stage engine cutout. There it is, second stage cutoff.
Yes, Seco.
And now we have quite a long post period.
Seco. Second stage engine cutoff.
So
we're waiting right now for a call out from guidance, nav, and control. They're looking at the orbit of the second stage. Right now, it looks at the telemetry we're getting. It looks like we've got a good orbit.
Sweet.
This is the parking orbit of the second stage. This is the first of 2 orbits we're headed to today. Looks like we've got a good one here. What's going to happen now is we're entering a coast phase.
Thank you, Paul. I agree. I'm the same way.
We're going to coast about halfway around the Earth, passing over the Antarctica Peninsula, come up over Africa.
Mark, to be honest, I have no idea. I'm still pretty new to YouTube. I don't know. I haven't really seen, but thank you for that a lot, honestly. Thank you.
52 minutes. So right now, we're just past T plus 10 minutes into flight. We've had a good first stage landing after a great countdown and a liftoff. Second stage performance looked very good getting into low Earth orbit. And so we're now going to go through about a 41-minute coast period. So we're going to leave you an animation showing where the second stage of the
guys, this is why you are here, because yes, they might go into a 41-minute animation of the second stage coasting, but I'm going to stay here to answer questions and have some good conversation with you guys. But I do want some more coffee. So I'm actually going to take a real quick little break and fill up on the good old morning stuff. So I'll be right back. I'm going to just play a quick little thing here, but stick around. I'll be right back as soon as I can, and we'll answer some questions. We'll have some good conversation, and hopefully we'll have a good time. I'll be right back. I think we all dreamt about going to space when we were kids. But when the space shuttle program ended in 2011, I discovered a void in my life. That emptiness led to a newfound obsession with space. A few years later, I wound up bidding on a Russian spacesuit as a joke. When the box arrived at my doorstep, my friends asked, "What are you gonna do with a spacesuit?" The answer? What can't I do with a spacesuit? That's how Everyday Astronaut was born. Since then, the suit hasn't left my side. It's even gone around the world with me. From remote villages in Myanmar, rockets and spaceships. To beautiful fields in Norway. I'm fighting a cow to get a picture right now.
Here I am on vacation in the beautiful Norway with my beautiful boyfriend.
I even proposed to my wife in the suit at Machu Picchu in Peru. These days I work with leaders in the space industry to create fun and inspirational content. I've even been invited to different NASA facilities across the country, all for the sake of sharing my excitement with the world. Hey there, it's me, Tim Dodd, the Everyday Astronaut. Now, I'm not sure if you're aware, but NASA is doing some incredible things.
This is church for us space nerds. This is where Gene Kranz was sitting when people first got on him. This is with permission. I still don't know how. I love that I'm standing on something that says urine bags. This thing's gonna fly like a cat in heat. Whatever that means. That dog's gonna have a sore throat by the end of the day, I'll tell you that. Especially once he tries to explain to his friends that he just saw an astronaut flying majestically through the sky for an hour. This thing has officially become the bane of my existence.
Everyday Astronaut's mission is to bring space down to Earth for everyday people, to communicate science through humor and imagination, but most importantly, to spark your curiosity, to want to find your place in the cosmos. Join my adventures as I seek to find out why exploring space is important, inspiring, and quite frankly, really, really neat. Show your support by visiting patreon.com/everydayastronaut. All right, and I'm back. Before we continue, I wanted to offer a huge and sincere thank you to all my Patreon supporters. Guess what? So I've actually been doing, I don't know if you can see in the background here. Maybe you can if I move like this. See those 4 things? Let me grab one, actually. So I actually made a bunch of these. I have 4 of these things, and I officially have a winner for the first giveaway out of 4. These are flown pieces of Space Shuttle Discovery. You can see a little bit of titanium. There's not much titanium actually on Discovery, or on space shuttles, believe it or not, but there is a little hunk of flown titanium. It's part of a bigger piece that I have up on my wall. You probably can't see that now. But thank you to Media for the coffee fund. But this is going out to my Patreon supporters. This week's winner, I should probably have had this all pre-prepared. His name is John, and he goes by at Space Treehouse on Instagram. John, congratulations. You are the first winner of this piece. Actually, we technically had a winner like 4 months ago. I didn't make a big stink about it. I only had like 5 Patreon supporters. And statistically, one person had almost all of the support. So that being said, this is now yours, John, and congratulations. Here's your piece of space shuttle titanium. I will be shipping that out to you this week. So congratulations. If you want a chance to win another one of, I have 3 more, consider becoming a Patreon supporter. Patreon.com/everydayastronaut. Thank you guys so much for all of you that support. It really means a lot. Okay, let's get into some questions. What are your guys' questions now? So SpaceX already launched the rocket. For those of you that are randomly just checking this out now, SpaceX has already done the primary portion of the launch. They are now in a coasting phase, which means the second stage actually coasts around the Earth, and then they do a maneuver burn, a circularization burn in this case, at their highest point to raise the orbit into a circular, like 500 by 500 kilometer orbit, I think is about what it is. So now we're just waiting the 40-some minutes for it to coast, and I'm going to be here to answer some questions. So, if I had to pick between the RS-25 and the F1, what would you root for? Believe it or not, my answer to that would be RS-25. That's a great engine. It's still a great engine. It's a phenomenal engine. If it was cheaper, I would love to see other companies be using it because it is an outstanding engine. It's very efficient. It's very robust, very durable. It gimbals quickly, which is cool. Gimbals a lot. I guess that's maybe not dependent on the RS-25 itself, but more the gimbling mechanism. Anyway, it's a great engine. It's still considered one of the best. How many hours do I have from on KSP, Kerbal Space Program? Well over 1,500. I think I have like 11 or 1,200 on my Steam account, and I played it for a year and a half before realizing that Steam was like, I bought it online and then was using Steam later, and I realized that Steam keeps track of it and like updates and all that stuff. So I probably 15 to 2,000. So there we go. Yeah, so let me answer real quick one more time. Let me just give you guys the update on what this is. So SpaceX, this is the third time they're launching the third set of satellites for their customer Iridium. Iridium is doing the Iridium NEXT constellation of satellites, which will end up being like 100 satellites that are basically all over the Earth at all times. You'll always be able to see an Iridium satellite. I actually can see them now. They're called Iridium flares. Sometimes you'll see them at night. They're really cool. But these ones don't have those big solar panels, so you don't see them anymore. But that being said, the Iridium constellation, they launched 10 satellites. And that's why if you see here in the webcast, let me pull it up bigger for a second. You can see they show 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's because they actually deploy. They have 10 satellites tucked inside this payload inside the fairing. Well, the fairing's actually gone now. So sitting on top of the rocket are 10 of these little satellites. And then what they do is they go up and they put the thing into a parking orbit. And then once they're all there, they kind of deploy one. And then these actually have their own propulsion on board, and they actually will continue to circularize and put themselves into a perfect orbit. But it's obviously cheaper to launch 10 at once when they all are along the same inclination. So there we go. Somebody asked why they vent. I have a video called Beginner's Guide to SpaceX. Check that out. I talk about venting. Venting is a normal thing. It's what you're actually seeing is specifically, you're not actually seeing fuel venting. I don't know if you're actually seeing any fuel. You probably do see some fuel vent. No, maybe not. I actually don't know if they vent fuel. But what you're for sure seeing, what I can absolutely definitively say you're seeing, is you're seeing when they pump oxygen into the vehicle. They need oxidizer and the fuel to make a boom, obviously. And the oxidizer is liquid oxygen. So obviously oxygen, as we know it, is a gas. And if you freeze it, if you get it down to a certain temperature, it turns into a liquid. And that's what they do. They chill it like crazy. And actually they go almost to the point of it being solid. They go super, super chilled. And they freeze it and they pump it in as liquid oxygen. Now, as it warms up due to ambient temperature, because obviously anywhere, unless it's like the coldest place on Earth, even the coldest place on Earth, it'll still continue to be a gas. So as it warms up from the air, it actually expands. And I don't remember if it's 100. I need to watch my own video to remember, but it's either 100 times or 1,000 times it expands. And instead of it expanding and exploding the rocket, they vent that excess pressure out. So that's why you see the gas flowing out from the vehicle, all those clouds and plumes before the launch. And what you're actually seeing is the cold interacting with the air outside and turning and condensing it. So, yeah, so that's totally normal. Don't worry. This shirt, I think I got this shirt on eBay, but unfortunately, guys, I'm going to stand like this. This is, of course, I Still Love You, which is West Coast. I don't know if they make a JRTI one. Just Read the Instructions, which is the West Coast barge. Drone ship. Oh, my gosh. Oh, no. It happened. Oh, no. Yeah, that's why. That's how. What questions do we have, guys? From liquid to gas is around 1,000 times. From Mike. Thank you, Mike. You have a I didn't know they made a JRTI. I should probably get another one of these so I can do whatever I want. So I can wear it properly for each one. That'd be great. All right. So, why do they launch eastwards if they have to make a polar orbit? They did not launch east. Sorry, we are looking at the Earth. Let me show you guys with this handy dandy globe. They are launching, what we're seeing right now, we're seeing the Earth like this. So you can see Antarctica's coming up to the right. So they are actually launching, am I doing this? Here, like this. Antarctica's like this. We're seeing them launch straight south out of California, or virtually straight south out of California. 86 degrees, I think, or something south. Instead of 90. 90 would be a perfect heading. And I think they launch 86 degrees. I'm not positive. I probably should know more. But I think they launch, I don't know. You know what, Sean? Thank you. First off, thank you, Sean. I should do a KSP orbit to match. I was actually thinking that'd be kind of a fun thing for me to do right now would be replay it kind of in Kerbal Space Program. Maybe I should do that. I was thinking about I could do that before the game. I could do it after the, like, if we have a thing like this, or after the launch. So some launches would be done right now, like those NROL missions where we don't even see the second stage do anything, and even like a Dragon mission, a mission to the International Space Station. honestly, Dragon gets deployed only like 10 minutes into flight, and then the mission's pretty much over until it docks and rendezvous with the International Space Station. So those webcasts are also very short. So maybe we could do some Kerbal. The only thing is, if I'm playing Kerbal, I can't answer you guys' questions as easily. So I do want to make sure I have time to answer your questions. So a parking orbit. I'll try the best I can. I'm not entirely sure if I hope I say this all right, but so for some missions, say they launch like this, launch out of Florida, and they put themselves into an orbit, say like this, a rough orbit. I'm just making something up. The first pass, the first time they park, or the first time they do their orbit, they might end up, they typically don't do an inclination change. So typically they try to launch at the inclination they need to launch at, which sometimes means waiting for the Earth to line up with the correct inclination. But what happens is typically they wait and they will raise their lowest point. So as the rocket, so if you speed up, if those of you that play Kerbal Space Program, you know this. If you speed up in your prograde, so going forward, if you speed up, opposite from you will basically start to rise. So if you are at your highest point and the lowest point of your orbit, say it's like really like this, and you are at your highest point and you want to raise your lowest point, you speed up at your highest point. So they will park themselves. They're in a safe orbit, and then they'll coast up to that highest point, do a burn, and that will raise their orbit. And that's what they're doing here. They are raising their orbit into their final to their final orbit. I think that's what. I think that's kind of how it works. I'm not entirely positive, so don't take all that for. Does SpaceX have astronauts? SpaceX is actually flying. Carl, I hope he's not talking about me. Does SpaceX have astronauts? So SpaceX is flying basically. SpaceX won't really have their own astronauts per se. As far as I know, it's interesting. They will be flying trained astronauts from NASA. They can fly ESA astronauts. They will have to train in-house, specifically on the Dragon vehicle, specifically egress, getting in and out of the vehicle, and emergency situations. But really, they are waiting to get to the correct direction to raise the apoapsis. There we go, Carl. Always with the knowledge, the big old knowledge drop. So astronauts, we'll have to see how it plays out, to be honest, because I don't really know. So are there any videos of fairing recovery? No, there are not, unfortunately. So they have videos from inside the fairing as it falls back to Earth. You can kind of see that. I don't remember if those show RCS thrusters, but they do actually have RCS packs, reaction control systems, little thrusters inside the fairings even, that help orient it, because it does need to come down in a controlled manner as it re-enters the atmosphere. So they do have that. So that's kind of cool. Of course, we could build a Saturn V in KSP, but KSP stock actually needs like a whole nother. It needs to get bigger one more time. I'm so mad that they don't have big enough SRBs for the space shuttle, because that's like what 90% of people are going to try to build at some point. And you want scale size SRBs, and they don't have a big enough diameter next stage for a Saturn V. You can't quite taper it properly. So boo. They do have RCS and parachutes. They do a parafoil landing at the very end. They kind of surf with it, which is pretty sweet. Varying footage there from Marcus House. Thank you. Patrick, yes, they are burning. The second stage on the Falcon 9 vehicle will never be fully recovered. It doesn't have the margins to really... It would take such a massive design change, as I've stated in some of my previous videos. It would require a massive, massive design change in order to become a recoverable second stage. And the Falcon 9 just isn't doing that. The Falcon 9 is doing great with what it's doing. They are going to be playing around with second stage, like working on atmospheric reentry. And they're probably testing some of that now. They've even kind of mentioned that they're testing some of that now. So who really knows? We'll kind of have to wait and see what happens. They will not be recovering the second stage, though, per se. Was there a special... I did not do a stream for the BFR live stream at IAC this year. I figured since it's all talking, it's all presentation, I didn't want to be talking over it. So you didn't miss anything. And as a matter of fact, you did miss something, because as soon as it was done, I took to scripting, and I actually was scripting online. So yeah. this chat is too quiet over in the Discord channel. I am sorry, guys. I don't know why. We should have Carl in there, but Carl's over here answering questions in the real chat. So, KSP BFR stream. I do those whenever I can. I'm still actually working. I will probably be doing another live stream, maybe even today, potentially. I'll be doing a BFR butt-to-butt docking. We did one the other day, but it wasn't a good enough live stream for me to edit and post up. I want to do better before I post it. You know what I mean? So it's fun to watch as I do miserably, as I get sad about how terrible I am at the game. But you can watch that, so just make sure you're subscribed and pay attention. I might give you a little bit of heads up on Twitter. On Twitter, you can search Everyday Astronaut, but my actual handle name is Everyday Astronaut, since Everyday Astronaut does not fit. Thanks a lot, Twitter. You're ruining my entire thing. But yeah, there we go. Bezos wanted his rocket to be like father like son, short and fat. Yeah, Zeus, it's so funny because I did a test last night. I did a whole dress rehearsal. Everything was fine. This is the same setup I use every time I do a stream. Every time. Then for whatever reason, I wake up and the one input was completely gone, apparently. I had to reinstate it into OBS entirely, which is really, really, really obnoxious. So, derp. Yep. Live stream clashes on Saturday, you and tomorrow. Yeah, I need to not do a live stream on Saturday while tomorrow's going. But unfortunately, Saturday is one of my best days to just actually sit and relax and not be working on other things. What is the box behind me? That's the Lego Saturn V that I need to finish. Yeah, that's what that is. Our Discord channel is exclusive to Patreon members. That way we keep it clean and we have highly the conversations in there are of high end. So if we invite anybody on YouTube into a Discord channel, it can get really messy really quick. So the Lego Saturn V I think was $120 US. I bought 3 of them. I sold one right away. I have another in a box that I'm going to keep in the box forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. And then this one is for me to build. I keep turning the wrong way. There, that one is for me to build. No. No. Yeah. That one's for me to build. And as you can see, I'm doing a great job of building the first and second stage 3 months ago. It's less than $180 US. I think it was only 120, wasn't it? Why don't we launch tiny payloads using rockets launched from weather balloons? So here's the deal. So we will be doing that. There's a company, somebody's trying to do that. A company called Zero to Infinity over in Spain is working on a balloon launch, like a strato launch. I'm actually going to be doing a video about that at some point here soon. But the problem with the balloon is it can't really lift a substantial rocket, really. The bigger the balloon gets, it just becomes ridiculous because you still need a fairly large rocket. The big thing isn't altitude. Altitude is the easy part of the rocket launch. And a balloon still has to reside in the atmosphere. Obviously, a balloon works by the atmosphere holding it up, right? And so even a balloon can only get to a certain altitude. And a rocket can get to that altitude very, very, very easily anyway. And the big deal with a rocket is it needs to still go horizontally at least 17,500 miles an hour or 27,000 kilometers an hour in order to stay in orbit. So then you have to think about the prospects of taking a balloon, getting it high but not all the way up into space because it can't be in space. You get it fairly high, and then you have to have a rocket attached to it large enough that can get your payload of X amount of weight 10 times the speed of a bullet. So it ends up just being more difficult. And think about, the logistics of dangling a rocket and like having it point in the right direction and all this stuff. It is a very, very, it's a big challenge. There's a reason it's not common. It's easier to have control of the vehicle sitting on a pad and make sure everything's okay and do all the checkouts and all this stuff and then ignite the engines, make sure the engines are okay, and then let go of the thing. That's a lot easier than doing trying to make sure that's all okay while it's up in the air. So that's why. Can you show that small rocket behind you up close? The small rocket as in this rocket? Because that's not a small rocket. This is what we've been kind of talking about. This is the Lego Saturn V. It's still not finished because I'm an idiot. But that's the Lego Saturn V. Yep. Yeah, so real quick, that is actually something really cool about that 0 to infinity balloon idea. Is they do have who is that? Thank you, Squat Beef Chunk, for reminding me. They do have like a donut shaped rocket, which is really smart because a normal rocket only lets the first stage engines light, and then you have the second stage engines. Well, you're still launching that second stage engine, and it's not doing any work until it ignites. The space shuttle, on the other hand, all of its engines were on all the time except for its orbital maneuvering engines. But it's more efficient if you have all of your engines working the whole time. Otherwise, you're kind of lofting up an engine that's doing nothing half the time, right? And with a big old fat donut like that, you can launch and ignite all of those engines on the outer ring, the inner ring, and the third stage. It actually has 3 stages. All of those engines light at all times. They're all being used together, which is really cool. And then they drop out the outer ring, and what happens is it actually cross-feeds. So those, like we do in a lot of us that play Kerbal Space Program, we cross-feed engines so that your tanks on the upper stages stay full the whole time. And what they actually do is they bypass those stages, and instead the outer ring actually just feeds the inner engines directly without pressurizing and repressurizing those tanks. It's actually a really smart system. So there we go. Where did I get the lamps in the background? I made them. How do engines work in the vacuum of space? Same way they work here on Earth. They aren't pushing against the air. It's the force of the exhaust leaving quickly, really quickly, that propels you in the opposite direction. Just like if you were to, if you were in space and you shot a gun, the gun would still have recoil, It's not against the air that's doing that. So now think about holding a machine gun in space and going with that machine gun. You'd start, even with you attached to it, even though these are tiny little light bullets in the scale of things, you would still be propelled against, using the recoil of the gun. Just because those bullets are being moved out very quickly, the opposite reaction of that is for the object that it's flying out of to actually be pushed in the opposite direction. So that's the same way it works in space. In the vacuum of space, it still is working on those same principles. It's not pushing against the air. It's the actual force. Really, it's the force inside the chamber, inside the combustion chamber of the engine, is actually pushing from the inside of the engine against the vehicle. So, yeah. All right. Gotta go. Bye from Hugo. There we go. FH. For those of you that don't know, if you see FH in here, that's going to be a very common acronym. Falcon Heavy. And Falcon Heavy is SpaceX's next generation. Well, not next generation. It's the evolution of their Falcon 9 rocket. So their current rocket, the Falcon 9, is their workhorse. They've launched 42 times now. The Falcon Heavy is basically 3 of those first stage cores strapped together to make a heavy launch vehicle. That means that they can take either, say, the same payload that they would normally only be able to send to low Earth orbit. They could now send that to like a geostationary orbit, or they could maybe launch something heavier than they were able to do now and still put it to the same destination. So Falcon Heavy. Yep, here we go. We're flying over the South Pole here in just a matter of seconds. So Lazy has a great question. Lazy Perth. A great question. Oh, hold on. Real quick in the Discord channel, does Leo's head and try to go up through the second stage or the third? This is the second stage only. I haven't started the third stage. There we go. And we did do a talk about this, Patreon people. We already kind of talked about the whole giveaway thing, and John for getting the bit of space shuttle. So anyway, back to this. What was the question? Somebody had a good question. Do they have contingencies? That's one of the beautiful things about the Falcon 9 rocket, is that they use 9 engines. And some people would sit there and go, oh, but that's 9 more chances for the engines to explode. Well, they've now fired over is it 1,000? Is that what it is? 1,000 times they've lit Merlin engines. They just recently posted, this is our 1,000th. If you take the 42 launches minus the 2 they've reused, 40, and minus Amos 6, which didn't actually ignite for flight, so 39 times 9, that's how many engines they've already flown with. What is that? I'm going to do a little quick math here, because I'm bad at math. Some of you can probably do that in your head. Not this guy. 351 engines on the first stage have flown on the first stage. And only one of those in flight has ever had an issue. And that was on the very first flight. They had an engine out. And the vehicle still made it into orbit, no problem, because it had 8 extra engines. And they build these things. The Octaweb has like basically blast protection. So if an engine would happen to grenade, it shouldn't affect the other engines. It would take a lot. And that's kind of one of the really cool things. You make a reliable engine like the Merlin, you test the absolute crap out of it. Way more, you know, they have more data on that engine than any other engine ever because they've flown it so much. Maybe not. The RS-25 has quite a bit of data because it has flown for 8 minutes times 3 engines times 135 launches. They have a lot of data with that too. But the Merlin engine, they have just mountains of data, and they've made it an insanely reliable engine. So there we go. Second flight, Grendel, and thank you. Grendel pointed out that it was the second flight that actually had an engine out. Who makes the engine? The Merlin engine is made by SpaceX. That's the foundation of their company is basically based on that Merlin engine. That was used originally in their Falcon 1 launch vehicle, which was to be a small sat launcher. It had a payload, I think, of 500 kilograms, payload capacity to low Earth orbit of 500 kilograms, which is very small compared to the Falcon 9, which has 9 of those engines. But it started all there for the Falcon 1. So that's something I'm going to be talking about in my upcoming video about using the BFR's Earth-to-Earth transportation system. I watched a bunch of people have been pointing out Thunderfoot to me, saying Thunderfoot thinks BFR is a joke, basically, or using it specifically as Earth-to-Earth transportation is ridiculous. He's obviously very anti-Elon Musk, which is fine. You can have your own opinions about anybody. I don't care. But he had many things wrong. He basically said, you know, like, oh, the rocket engines are so dangerous. Well, at some point, riding on a jet engine was insane. You know, you have these turbines spinning at thousands, hundreds of thousands of RPM, and you're going to be riding on that? You know, that was nuts. Wow, how could you do that? Riding on a propeller, you know, an internal combustion engine with a propeller was insane. The reliability of that was basically mute, you know. Now we're getting to that point with rocket engines where they aren't as dangerous as they once were because we have so much time to have collected data to make them more reliable. And that's what's going to happen with the Raptor. The Raptor is in its, you know, it's only in its initial design phase, kind of like the Merlin engine was as it was a baby. But they're going to be testing the absolute crap out of this thing until it's as reliable as the Merlin engine or even more reliable. And it should actually be more reliable because methane burns a lot cleaner than kerosene does. So there's less chances of it like coking up and getting, you know, all gritty on the inside of the engine. So the Merlin engine is great, very reliable. But honestly, I think the Raptor engine has potential to be even, he's even more, sorry, I'm kind of reading your guys' comments. The Raptor engine has potential to be even more reliable. So, granted, its chamber pressure is a lot higher. They'll have to overcome that. Sounds like they're going to do that. I watched a couple of Thunderfoot stuff. He's in the right mindset. I like what he does. He's intelligent. He is pro-science. He's using the scientific method, but he's just so negative. Like, you don't need to be negative. You don't need to be a pessimist. And he's doing that probably for clickbait, you know. He's probably just trying to get a reaction out of people that are excited about stuff. But to me, if I were a betting man, I would never bet against Elon Musk. Granted, some of the things he says don't quite come to fruition as he said it is. But at this point, how could you bet against him? Look at what he's done already. Tesla was thought to be impossible. Everyone laughed at him. Getting a Falcon 9 vehicle was impossible. Docking with the International Space Station was impossible. Landing a first stage of a orbital class booster using propulsive landing was impossible. Now it's no big deal. So they know what they're doing. He knows what he's doing, and the team he has around him is incredibly smart and hardworking, and they're all motivated. So don't bet against him. Where do they source their methane? Great question. I have no idea. I don't even know how do you extract this. I don't get how you would extract oxygen from the air, like pure oxygen, and how you get like helium and all this stuff. I'm not a chemist. I have no idea. I'm sure it's something very cool. Mike, thank you. I really appreciate that. Thank you, Mike. Everyone, round of applause for Mike. Mikey368. Thank you very, very much. So, do I have a Tesla or do I plan to get one? I have a Model 3 reservation right now, and we are looking at like a January through March delivery. I'm guessing it's way more on that March to April side because the Model 3 is a little bit behind. But we're debating just doing one car and getting an S and just selling our other 2 cars. I don't know. An S would be great. I do want all-wheel drive. I live in the northern climate. We have a lot of snow here in Iowa. So I would sure love, yeah, I sure would love an S for the all-wheel drive. It'll be a while before the Model 3 has the option of all-wheel drive. So there we go. Well, I don't get involved in politics about using Discord or not and Reddit. Sorry if it's just an application. There we go. I'm trying to keep up with you guys. Sorry. When's SpaceX going to make all launches? I don't quite get that question. The Model 3 all-wheel drive will probably not be in March. Yeah, it'll be a while. So, sorry, just double checking here. Elon was born in South Africa. That's right. Did I ever? I have been to France a few times. Big fan. Could you see the rocket if it flew over you right now? If you would be able to see the rocket if it lines up, so you kind of have to be. It has to be dark where you are, and it has to be reflecting sunlight. So there's a window kind of. Typically, it's within an hour on either side of sunrise and sunset. Well, sunrise an hour before sunrise and an hour after sunset. If you see a vehicle go overhead, like the International Space Station, it has to have something big and reflective. Then you typically get a pretty good chance to be able to actually witness it. So, you just bought a Saturn V Lego set. Awesome. Hopefully, guys. By the way, I'm pointing out here. Looks like we only have about 8 minutes before second engine reignition. So. Stick with us, guys. Let me know if you have any more questions. Will it come close to Singapore? No, it looks like it is going. It'll be flying over the east coast of Africa soon. So if you live in like Madagascar, it looks like it. Wait, did it already? It will be flying over South Africa soon. So it'll be saying hi to Elon's home. But yeah, then it'll just kind of continue up the east coast. You did miss the launch, but luckily you can easily rewatch it on SpaceX's webcast. Everything was very successful. Sorry. Would be neat if they could leave the part of the second stage in orbit when they do another launch. They could use a modified stage. Doesn't have the engine, only fuel and cargo. Then they can mate the 2 in orbit. So in Discord, we are talking a little bit about. That's honestly very similar to ULA's ACES upper stage, advanced cryogenic. Evolutionary stage or something, I don't remember, evolve stage. And the idea is like this second stage, there's this chance there's going to be a decent amount of fuel left over even as it re-enters the atmosphere and dies. It'll have some residual fuel. And some payloads, there'd be a ton of fuel left over, like maybe even a third or something. I'm making that up, but a large portion of fuel left. And the idea is if you are launching something on the same trajectory often, why not dock those? So say the International Space Station or some other, like a geostationary orbit or something. A lot of those end up on the same inclination. Those second stages are coasting near each other. Maneuver them up to each other, dock, fuel one up fully. It might take 10 launches, but at SpaceX's rate this year, they'd be able to do that very quickly. Fill up the second stage, and then you have a brand new second stage in orbit that has, not brand new, but you have it full of fuel, so it has a ton more delta V, and you'd be able to send something pretty substantially heavy. And that's actually kind of like what BFR is going to be doing. BFR is essentially taking that concept. The upper stage will basically drain itself, and it will get itself into a parking orbit where it will be basically out of fuel. They'll probably leave enough fuel for it to come home if it needs to. But then another one comes up that has fuel left over, and it fills up that first one. And then another one comes up and fills up that first one until the first one's full, giving it enough delta V to get to the moon and back without refueling, or to Mars, land on Mars, refuel on Mars, and then come home. So that's kind of that is something being proposed. Yeah. There we go. Let's see. Could I guess the time intervals between each booster when synchronous landing of the Falcon Heavy? Pokebit. Very good question. They're going to land, honestly, probably within within seconds of each other, maybe almost virtually instantaneous. If you think about it, they should be performing the exact same boost back maneuvers. They should be performing the exact same reentry maneuvers. The only variables, really, besides, obviously if there's like a little bit of extra firing of a thruster or something, the only real variables they have at play is a little bit of atmospheric variable at the very last little bit. And even with a strong wind, they're going to be so close to each other. They're going to be within hundreds of feet of each other the whole time. There shouldn't be any... I'm guessing we'll see those things touch down almost simultaneously, which would be absolutely incredible. Yep. So, somebody else had a question here. Do I think Zubrin talks often with Musk? I think they do talk very often now, at least more so than they did. Zubrin, I think, and Musk got together at the very beginning of SpaceX at some point, and they seemed to get along philosophically. At some point, Zubrin became pessimistic about SpaceX, and that changed again now. It sounds like he's a lot more optimistic about, especially the current BFR. He apparently has been, I don't know this for sure, but he seems to be somebody that has said 150 tons to Mars is what you need to get to Mars. And that's exactly the number that SpaceX is quoting landing on Mars, 150 tons. So will I be live for Falcon Heavy 1? Yes. Not live here. I will be live in Florida. I will be there for Falcon Heavy no matter what. I make it down to 2 or 3 launches a year. I've been to one in Vandenberg. It was a Delta II launch. I will be at Falcon Heavy, though, basically no matter what. And guys, you need to... I need to just put this out there about Falcon Heavy. We have a lot of questions about Falcon Heavy and a lot of people questioning the timeline. Yes, we want to get Falcon Heavy flying, but we want it to be right. So don't forget, they still have to do a bunch of pad repairs. They still have to finish fixing up... Ooh, something happened to their webcast. All right. They still have to continue to repair and get pad SLC-40 back online, which is SpaceX's old launch pad for the Falcon 9. SLC-40 will continue to only be Falcon 9, but 39A, where they're currently launching out of on the East Coast, is kind of, they're actually still retrofitting and getting it ready for Falcon Heavy, even in between launches. They've actually had a downtime of about 3 weeks right now, so they will be. They're working on rebuilding 39A and preparing it to be able to launch Falcon Heavy. Once that's done, hopefully we'll see Falcon Heavy roll out of the hangar there and go vertical. And then hopefully soon thereafter, they'll probably do a fitment test and make sure everything's good to go. And then soon after, they'll do a static fire. I'm expecting them to do a static fire this year. But they have to look at a lot of data. They're going to be launching or igniting 27 Merlin engines at once. So there might be some things that they're going to be reading data on how much stress there is on the center core with the side boosters and everything. They'll probably do some throttle ability, all these different things. They'll probably make sure everything's okay. That's going to be insane. And then after that, hopefully, if all is well, very soon after they'll try to launch. So the big thing is to pay attention to static fire. The date for Heavy keeps slipping, so it's not even worth quoting a date. Soon. I'm not worried about the date because the date, whatever they set right now, will not hold. I'm more just paying attention to the pad. Pay attention to Launchpad 40. Pay attention to Launchpad 39. On Reddit, they do a very good job of keeping people up to date, as well as NASA Spaceflight. They also do a good job of keeping people up to date as well, and Spaceflight Now. So get your sources and kind of try to keep up with it yourself if you can. I'll try to update you as often as I can. But yeah, here we go. We're going to hear about this now.
Welcome back to our continuing coverage of Mission 3 for our Iridium NEXT satellite deployments. We're just past T plus 51 minutes since liftoff. We're coming up in less than a minute on reignition of the upper stage engine. This is a short burn of the MVAC-D engine lasting just about 4 seconds. That'll raise us to the circular altitude of 625 kilometers. Currently, on the view from space, we're using cold gas thrusters to help keep propellant settled at the bottom of the tank so that it's right on top of the turbopump when we spin it for ignition of the engine. So we're gonna wait right now for ignition of the engine, and then we'll come back following that with a view on how the orbit looks.
You're basically seeing ice falling out there. They're thrusting right now to propel the craft forward so all the fuel settles down at the aft end of the vehicle. so that when they ignite it, the fuel is getting sucked up instead of nothing. And now we see second stage.
We've got ignition and we have shutdown of the MVAC-D engine.
A quick little kick.
As I mentioned, it's a very short burn. It does not take much to add a lot of energy to the orbit with the thrust of the second stage engine. What we're waiting to hear right now is what the orbit looks like.
Jerry, a quick little, I should not.
And we've heard the call out. Guidance, navigation, and control has announced a nominal orbit insertion. So we're through the second burn of the upper stage engine. As you can see on the screen right now, a little bit of what you're looking at.
So if you're an American and you're flying on a Russian Soyuz, you wear a Russian suit, doesn't mean you're a cosmonaut. You're still an astronaut. So, yeah, there you go.
We're going to go through a period of about 5 minutes as we get the second stage pointed in the right direction, make sure all the attitude and rates are correct before we begin the 15-minute sequence of deploying Iridium satellites. Now that's going to occur over several ground stations. We're currently, as you can see from the orbit map, we're to the east of the southern tip of the African continent. We will cross over several ground stations. We'll try to bring you as many of the satellite deployments as we can. There may be delays during that period for confirming separation, so we'll bring it to you once we know what the data shows us. But for now, we're in a good orbit. We're lining up for deployment of Iridium, and we're going to come back with live coverage in just a few minutes as we begin the sequence of deploying the 10 Iridium NEXT satellites.
All right, so just going to catch you guys up here real quick. There might be some people that just popped in out of nowhere, and what they're working on right now is so SpaceX just launched a Falcon 9 rocket carrying 10 satellites for their customer Iridium. Now, what they do is they're launching this thing south out of California. This is normal, by the way. These launches happen often. This is the third for this specific thing. This is the third for Iridium. This is the 42nd launch of a Falcon 9 rocket. This is the 14th this year, so this stuff happens quite often. Now, what happens is it flies straight south like this and puts itself into a polar orbit, right? And what happened was they got it its highest point since it left from here was somewhere over Madagascar is where that's actually really cool if you look at it. Basically exactly opposite side of the Earth was the highest point of its orbit, 625 kilometers above the surface of the Earth. At this point, they sped up for only 4 seconds using that second stage, which then raised the lowest point, the perigee over here. So apogee, highest point, perigee, lowest point. They raised their perigee, so now they're in a circular orbit of 625 by 625. And in a few minutes, we're going to see them deploy all 10 satellites, one after another, about once every minute. And that is a successful mission. Then once those go off, once the payload is off of the vehicle, SpaceX's mission is done and is considered a success. With this being 10 satellites, you do have to wait for all 10 to be considered a complete success, which we expect there to be no problem. This is pretty standard issue stuff. But most times when they launch something, it's just a single satellite. And the second that thing leaves, SpaceX is hands off. They're done. They did their mission. I guess they do have to still deorbit and things like that, but for the customer, they're done. Somebody asked in our Discord channel, what's the gas escaping on the second stage? That is, they're using RCS thrusters. So they're using cold nitrogen to propel the craft and orient it as well. But the second stage ends up still needing to be settled before they do a burn. So you can see it using some nitrogen gas right now. Also, venting of oxygen still happens as it warms up. Here we go.
The Falcon 9 second stage is in the desired orbit. The 10 Iridium NEXT satellites are mounted on a dispenser on top of the second stage, and we're coming up on the deployment sequence. Over the next 15 minutes, we will separate 10 Iridium NEXT satellites into the desired orbit. From this orbit, they will eventually raise themselves to their final orbit where they'll integrate into the constellation. So we expect in about half a minute, we should get deployment of the first satellite. The view of the satellites you see here, there are 10 satellites. They are in 2 stacks of 5. So we'll see some of the satellites deploy, others we won't. They're on the back side of the dispenser. They're not in view of the camera. So right now we're just counting down, waiting for the flight computer to transition to the deployment state to release the first Iridium NEXT satellite.
Here we go. Here comes deployment number 1 of one of the 10 satellites.
First spacecraft deploy confirmed.
And we have confirmation.
There we go.
First
You can see it
spacecraft
down there.
deployment is confirmed. I think we could see a little bit of motion there. That one was coming from the top of the stack, so it's kind of hard to see with the other satellites underneath it. Now, as a reminder, every 100 seconds we go through a sequence where we will deploy another satellite.
Cameron, you have to check out my my page. We play a lot of Kerbal here.
Into flight. The next one ought to come up at T plus 5849. So about 1 minute from now, we'll hopefully get a second view from space. Satellite.
The Confident Gamer, this is not a geostationary orbit. This is a low Earth polar orbit. So low Earth orbit, 625 by 625 kilometers in a polar orbit. So going north to south. I do believe that is actually a chunk of ice, yes. Those asking, I don't actually know what exactly it is. I think it's, my guess would be iced up nitrogen. If anybody knows the exact answer, that'd be great. What do I think about, finally, at long last, the Apollo 11 mission computer binary recovered by a guy reading rote memory modules in South Africa? I don't actually know what you're talking about. I have no idea, Luke, but that sounds very computer source. In theory, you can link the real Apollo 11 operating system computer.
We have confirmation. Spacecraft number 2 has deployed. You can see it just moving off at the very top of the screen before the camera cut back. That's a view of the upper stage engine. For those who are wondering, that white lump that you see on the edge of the nozzle, that is solid oxygen. So if you can imagine the oxygen you breathe, not only is it cold enough to turn liquid, it's cold enough now in space to actually turn to liquid oxygen or solid oxygen. It's an oxygen ice.
There we go.
That's of no issue to the vehicle. You may see those chunks dislodge from time to time. They're
solid oxygen ice.
Easily broken apart.
Now we know. Solid oxygen ice. That's awesome. John knows, man. John knows. Maybe he's reading this. Who knows? There we go. Solid oxygen. John is in this chat. Confirmed. I have not met John yet, but I've met a lot of other people.
Away from spacecraft number 3 being deployed.
Okay, we'll continue to answer questions here because he's just talking about deploying, so. Will the O2 ice sublimate in space? I have no idea. Is anybody smart enough to answer that? Oh, let's see. Goodbye, Aditya. Thank you. I love it. Yeah. John is awesome. I don't think John is in our live stream. He is very busy. I'm listening to what he's saying. He's not really saying the Earth is flat. How is the satellite orbiting? Very good. Goodbye. So, Mosern asks if these satellites will stay in orbit forever. Yes and no. So, they require some station keeping. Although they're in space, they are still at an altitude where there is some small, very small amount of atmosphere. Because don't forget, the atmosphere doesn't just stop. It doesn't just cut off. It tapers. Just like here on Earth, you know, when we're here on ground level, when you rise in sea level, from the higher you get from sea level, the atmosphere slowly gets thinner and thinner and thinner. And it's not like it's all of a sudden just stops. There's still upper atmosphere, even at, you know, say 1,000 kilometers. There's very, very, very trace amounts of atmosphere. It just is thicker at the bottom. So even at 625 kilometers in altitude, there's still a tiny, tiny, tiny bit of atmosphere that it's running into, and it produces a little tiny bit of drag. That's why these spacecraft need to have their own propulsion on board. It's called station keeping, and they need to be able to kind of continually boost themselves into an orbit. Geostationary orbits, on the other hand, are far enough away that they'll essentially remain in orbit. I I believe, pretty much forever unless something runs into it or changes its trajectory. But things in low Earth orbit would naturally decay. Their orbits would naturally decay and end up re-entering at some point. There's number 4. That's a great view. So these days they do make sure that there's enough fuel on board of the satellites so that they can safely deorbit and put it and deorbit it somewhere over the ocean so it's not overpopulated areas when the satellite is at the end of its life. That's built into the mission. That's built into the lifespan of the vehicle, and they will deorbit it on purpose at the end of its life. So these things are made to last, I don't know, exactly 15, 20 years. So there we go. I don't really have any updates on SpaceX's satellite constellation yet. We know that they are working. I think the biggest thing is right now working with the FCC to make sure that they can legally do their own satellite constellation. It sounds like it's become the concern is a bit of a monopoly / some traditional telecommunication issues. I'm sure their lawyers and everything are working very hard on that, but hopefully we'll see that. Quit F5 to reload. How much does deploying the satellites throw the second stage orbit off? Good, very good question. I'm sure it's not unsubstantial. I'm sure they take into account the fact that it does have to when it deploys, it will push against the second stage. I'm sure the second stage has to do a slight amount of remaneuvering. That's a guess, but there is, for each action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So for instance, what is it? There was a mission where they were taking pictures, and there's a shutter mechanism, and NASA had to realize that every time the shutter physically moved, it was shaking the spacecraft. So as they learned, as they were getting kind of more blurry than they were expecting pictures, or not as clear pictures as they were expecting, they learned to fire a thruster exactly opposite of the shutter at the exact same time and the exact same force, canceling out that movement, keeping the spacecraft perfectly still. There we go. I like that answer. They do push. They have them on opposite sides of the spacecraft on each side. So maybe as one pushes one, it might put a little bit of rotation, a little bit of yaw or pitch into the spacecraft, and then they would actually cancel it out when they launch on the other, when they dispense on the other side. So we'll see. You'd like to know my thought on resonant cavity thrusters? I assume you're talking about like an EM for a thruster. I don't have any personal conclusions about the EM, an impossible drive, basically. We'll have to wait until somebody takes it up and tests it in space. I think that's where we're at, to be honest. So, how do reaction wheels work? Think of a bicycle wheel. Have you ever seen that experiment where you're holding a bicycle wheel, you spin it up, and you use the torque of the momentum to spin you around on an office chair, kind of like this? That same principle is exactly what happens in space with the reaction wheels. They spin up a wheel in different directions to help spin and orient. They're very slow moving. In Kerbal Space Program, there we go. Another number 6 deployed. That was cool. So in Kerbal Space Program, those reaction wheels work really quickly. You can spin a spacecraft around like almost instantly, In real life, reaction wheels are very, very, very slow, but they're efficient. They don't require any propulsion. All they require is electricity. So, is the orbit of Earth getting too cluttered, space junk-wise? Again, don't forget, most of the stuff decays on its own and will re-enter on its own. So space junk, yes, it is obviously something we need to take into consideration. But when people see those infographics, look how cluttered space is. You do have to remember that these are at many different altitudes and accounted for in many different altitudes. These are vehicles that are never any larger, except for the International Space Station, never any larger than like a car. And so maybe there's 1,000 things. Imagine if there are 1,000 cars placed on the Earth, and then you're driving around really fast, and the chances of you hitting one, they'd be so crazy spaced out, you wouldn't even probably ever see one, right? But when we see those animations of how cluttered space is, they enlarge them so you can see these things. These are so tiny, teeny, tiny. Obviously, if we're looking at one right now, you would not see any of the satellites because they're the size of a car. You can't see cars. You know what I mean? And then they're at different altitudes. So we track all of these. We know where things are in space, and we fly in between them. We fly around them. They know how to avoid most of the amount of space debris. But the problem is, a lot of dispensers will end up dispensing basically into. Hang on, we're gonna do that. A lot of these dispensers now that SpaceX does, they don't use any propulsive bolts, so they don't end up with any more debris in space. They use like springs and things, which is pretty cool. So they are taking that into consideration. You can see a car from U2 or SR-71. Interesting. Did not know that. Dang. So even at that altitude, you're able to see. Is hydrogen peroxide a better oxidant than liquid oxygen? Does it perform? Luke, I don't know. I know it's... I think it actually is a better... I don't know. I don't know how to answer that. They use springs because they can test them. Thank you, Toby. Reaction wheel equals fidget spinner. Dang. Mike, that's interesting. Mike in Discord is talking about, I watched a documentary about plasma engines, and the problem with plasma engines is that their thrust to weight ratio is pitiful. So in order to push something large in space with a plasma engine or an ion engine, you need a lot of electricity and you need a large engine. And it hasn't been economical previously, but now with cheap launch costs like SpaceX, perhaps it's no big deal. Ooh, we get a little shot of mission control. There's Gwyneth Shotwell. She is, I can use my mouse. She is right there. The best oxidant is oxygen. Thank you. There we go. Thank you, Angun. Oh, we just saw a hunk of solid oxygen fall off the vehicle. That was kind of cool. Bye. People will say that's a UFO or something. Alien spacecraft. You won't believe what SpaceX doesn't want you to know. That aliens went up and touched the spacecraft and then flew away. AKA solid oxygen. See you, Nurch. Thanks for hanging out. Cameron, stick around for a while. Come to multiple live streams. Continue to be a positive member of our community, and then hit me up sometime. And if you're qualified for the job, you can moderate. Unidentified flying oxygen. It's hailing hard there. Kung Fu Fat Bear is experiencing some hail, apparently. Chemtrails in space. Proof of Illuminati. Isn't EM drive issues the wearing of the filter? I have no idea, Roy. I have no idea. Yeah, guys, I have to say, a lot of people ask me, like, why aren't I trying to become an astronaut? Why aren't I trying to do this? And to be honest, I've had no real ambitions of ever being an astronaut. Growing up, I never wanted to be an astronaut. I dream about it a lot now, though. And as it becomes more and more reliable, as it becomes cheaper, I don't want to be an explorer. I don't want to be the first person on Mars. Woo! 9th. That's a cool view. That's awesome. That's very cool. But I don't want to be the one to explore. I don't want to go to the moon anytime soon until it's totally normal. I will be a space tourist all day long. I don't want to be a professional astronaut. But I do think about it more and more. Views like this make me go, yes, please. Carl, thank you, Carl. Ducky Quack Quack. Classic question. I get that all the time. Can I quack? Will they deorbit the second stage? They will, but we will not see that. Do I think the BFR will be cheaper than Saturn V to produce? Absolutely. The development costs and the initial build of it it will still be cheaper than Saturn V because we're not doing cost plus contracting, so that's not. So SpaceX is building it all in house. But that being said, the BFR will be expensive because it's carbon fiber, a lot of new technologies. But especially when it comes down to launch price, if we're reusing it, it'll be a lot cheaper. But I even suspect that the actual building of it will be significantly cheaper than Saturn V. How big are these satellites? Each one of them is, let's find out here. I think each one's about 800 kilograms. 800 860 kilograms each. So roughly 1,700, 1,800 pounds for those of us that are stuck in the Imperial system. Yeah, that's... and I don't know their physical size. They're probably the size of like a big go-kart or something. I'm not sure. Sounds good. Check in. Hey, Mark. Thank you. Nico is pronounced Nico. Please look at the camera and say, hi, Nico. Glad you're up early watching rockets. Is that a Spider-Man blanket? Hi, Nico. Is that a Spider-Man blanket? I'm glad you're up this morning watching rockets. Very cool. Hi, Nico. Awesome. Thanks, Mark. Thank you very much for that. And also, thanks for watching, Nico. That's awesome. That made my morning, actually. That's really cool. How old is Nico, if you don't mind me asking? Hopefully, Nico, hopefully you end up building rockets someday or riding on rockets and becoming an astronaut. That's very cool. They're the size of a phone booth. Thank you. He just said nominal webcast, which I like. Thank you, guys. I'll let them sign off, and then I'll kind of do my own sign off here. Let's listen to that. They're just doing their normal thank yous.
On social media, on our Twitter feed, as well as on Instagram. And of course, on our internet webpage at SpaceX.com.
Says John. I love it.
We'd like
John's
to
such a
thank
dad.
you
He's
for
the
letting
best
us
kind
share
of
the
dad. I would
14th
huge
flight
be
of
my dad
Falcon
all day
9
long.
with you. We look forward in a couple of days to the 15th flight.
I'm going to
And
just go ahead and answer a
until
few
that
more
webcast,
questions, but then I'm
we're
going to head
signing
out.
off,
I actually have to
saying
get
thank
going
you
here soon.
and
So,
goodbye.
I want to go ahead and say first and foremost, I don't think Falcon Heavy is a mistake. They need it still to supplement. It'll be a long time before BFR launches. At best, 5 years. Most likely, 7 years. Well, I guess at best to Mars in 5 years. I'm still going to say, realistically, it's probably more like the first launch ever will be 4 or 5 years away. And in that meantime, they still need a heavy launcher. And so Falcon Heavy is going to fill that slot for their customers who have already purchased heavy launch. So it is absolutely necessary. Sorry, I didn't realize there was music playing. There we go. So guys, hopefully next time we launch, or next time we have a live stream here, we're going to cancel this so we don't see that. Hopefully next time this stuff goes off, guys, I have a lot fewer technical difficulties, which I don't know why we had when I had a dress rehearsal last night. I was being responsible, making sure this is nice and smooth. In 2 days, I will be doing another live stream, so join me for that. It'll be the SES, what is that, 11? Or what are we at now, guys? I can't even keep track anymore. SES 11, which will be using a reused Falcon 9 booster, which is really exciting. I'm really glad that all went off perfectly. Make sure, guys, if you're not already subscribed, subscribe here. I'm working right now on a BFR Earth-to-Earth video, which I'll hopefully have maybe by the end of the week. That's my goal, is to have this thing out by the end of the week. It was my goal to have it out by the end of last week, but it's now my goal to have it at the end of this week. I'll also be doing a few live streams just for fun when I can, working on butt-to-butt docking with the BFR and maybe sending it to the moon and all these other fun things. So yes, there is another launch in 2 days. It'll be on the East Coast at Pad 39. Yeah, everything's looking good there. So yeah, I just want to thank you guys so much. Again, I owe a really, really, really big thank you to my Patreon supporters. You guys make this all possible. You're the reason that I now have a Micro Four Thirds camera, better studio lighting, better audio. You're the reason this is all happening. That encouragement means the world. If you want to help support what I do, not necessarily for this. This is just for fun, guys. What the real hard work is the actual produced content YouTube videos. This stuff is just for fun. I don't expect, when you guys tip, that is entirely unnecessary. Really appreciate it, but entirely unnecessary. The hard work is in the scripting, the shooting, the editing of the videos that we produce here. And when I say we, it is just me. I'm a one-man team, but I do have a lot of help over here in my Discord channel and with my Patreon supporters. If you want to join the Discord channel and help script and help edit and all that stuff, by becoming a Patreon member, you have the option of joining our Discord channel. So thank you guys so much. It's really great to see all of you people here joining in a positive conversation. Again, we want this to be a positive place to have good conversation, to ask questions. Even if they're beginner questions, that's great. That's why I'm here, guys. If you're advanced, you can help me answer some of these advanced questions that I don't know, and I thank you for being around and helping out with that as well. So that being said, guys, I hope that you have a fantastic week, a good start to the week with a successful launch of SpaceX's Falcon 9 and for the Iridium NEXT-3 mission. I'm glad everything's looking fantastic. We'll see you guys on Wednesday It might be Thursday for some of you, depending on where you live. I don't know the times exactly, but I probably should double check on that. But that'll be the next time you see my face, most likely. Meanwhile, I'm going to be working on this video. So thank you guys so much for joining. We'll see you on Wednesday. I'm Tim Dodd, the Everyday Astronaut, bringing space down to Earth for everyday people. I think we all dreamt about going to space when we were kids. But when the space shuttle program ended in 2011, I discovered a void in my life. That emptiness led to a newfound obsession with space. A few years later, I wound up bidding on a Russian spacesuit as a joke. When the box arrived at my doorstep, my friends asked, "What are you gonna do with a spacesuit?" The answer? What can't I do with a spacesuit? That's how Everyday Astronaut was born. Since then, the suit hasn't left my side. It's even gone around the world with me. From remote villages in Myanmar, rockets and spaceships, to beautiful fields in Norway.
I'm fighting a cow to get a picture right now.
Here I am on vacation in the beautiful Norway with my beautiful boyfriend.
I even proposed to my wife in the suit at Machu Picchu in Peru. These days I work with leaders in the space industry to create fun and inspirational content. I've even been invited to different NASA facilities across the country, all for the sake of sharing my excitement with the world.
Hey there, it's me, Tim Dodd, the Everyday Astronaut. Now, I'm not sure if you're aware, but NASA is doing some incredible things. This is church for us space nerds.
This is where Gene Kranz was sitting when people first got on. This is with permission. I still don't know how. I love that I'm standing on something that says urine bags. This thing's gonna fly like a cat eat. Whatever that means. That dog's gonna have a sore throat by the end of the day, I'll tell you that. Especially once he tries to explain to his friends that he just saw an astronaut flying majestically through the sky for an hour. This thing has officially become the bane of my existence.
Everyday Astronaut's mission is to bring space down to Earth for everyday people, to communicate science through humor and imagination, but most importantly, to spark your curiosity, to want to find your place in the cosmos. Join my adventures as I seek to find out why exploring space is important, inspiring, and quite frankly, really, really neat. Show your support by visiting patreon.com/everydayastronaut.